Come to me, my baby.
Stop that girl. You're not taking her anywhere.
My child belongs to this family. Mama, take me home. Touch my child and everybody here will see your shame today.
They took my daughter on a Tuesday. The same Tuesday I buried my husband. The same Tuesday the pastor stood at my gate and told me I deserved it. Let me say that again so you feel it the way I felt it. My husband's body was not yet cold in the ground. The soil on his grave was still wet from the rain. My eyes were still swollen from crying. My wrapper was still black. And while I was walking back from the cemetery, dragging my feet through the red mud of Ohafia, my neighbor, Mama Chukudi, ran to me, breathless, her face broken, and said, "Adaze, they took Chisom. She is gone." I did not scream. I did not fall. Something inside me went very, very quiet, like the world had taken a deep breath and forgotten to let it out. Chisom was 9 years old, my only child, the only reason I had survived the last 3 years of a marriage that nearly killed me. She had her father's nose and my stubbornness, and a laugh so loud it could embarrass you in church. She was my blood walking outside my body. And she was gone. I turned to Mama Chukudi and I asked her, calmly, who took her? She looked at the ground, and that single moment of her eyes dropping away from mine told me everything before she even opened her mouth. Your husband's family, she whispered. His brothers. They came with a bus. They said she belongs to them now, that you have no right to her since Emeka is dead. I want you to understand something about where I come from. In many parts of eastern Nigeria, when a man dies, his family can arrive at the widow's house like locusts. They take the furniture, they take the car, they take the land, and sometimes, God forgive them, they take the children. Because in their eyes, the child belongs to the father's bloodline, not to the mother who carried her for 9 months, not to the woman who breastfed her and woke up at midnight when she had fever and walked her to school every single morning holding her small hand. In their eyes, I was just a vessel. Now that the man was dead, my purpose was finished. But they did not know me. They had never truly known me. My name is Adeze Okonkwo. I was born poor, raised by a single mother in a one-room apartment in Aba, and I had fought for everything I had with my bare hands. I had fought for my education. I had fought through a marriage full of secrets and shame. I had fought to protect Chisom from a father who loved her, but also broke her mother in places that never fully healed. I had survived too much to lie down now. I went inside my house. I changed out of my burial wrapper. I put on flat shoes. I packed a small bag. I did not cry. I did not pray. I did not wait for morning. I walked out of that gate at 7 p.m. with one thought pounding in my chest like a second heartbeat. I am coming for my daughter, and God help anyone who stands between us. The first 20 miles, I walked alone in the dark. No bus, no money for Okada. My husband's family had cleaned out the house account 3 days before he died. I found out later they had forced him to sign papers when he was too sick to understand what he was doing. I had 200 naira in my bra and a small torch that kept flickering. The road from Ohafia to Arochukwu is not a kind road. It is narrow and hungry, full of potholes that swallow ankles, lined by thick bush that breathes and moves at night. Trucks pass and their lights blind you, and the wind from their speed nearly pushes you off the road. Dogs bark from compounds as you walk by. Once, a man on a motorcycle slowed down beside me and said things that made my skin crawl. I kept walking. I did not look at him. I held the torch tighter like a weapon. But the road outside was nothing compared to the road inside my head. Because as I walked, everything I had been too busy to feel started coming for me. I thought about Emeka, My husband, the man I had loved once, truly, completely, the way only a young woman who grew up without a father can love a man who showed her kindness. He had been gentle at the beginning. He brought me rice and stew from his mother's house when I was a university student surviving on Gari. He called me Adam, my Ada, and said it like it meant something holy. But marriage showed me another Emeka, a man controlled by his family, a man who let his mother insult me at Christmas dinner and said nothing, a man who, when I lost our second pregnancy, alone in a hospital, because he had traveled and not told me where, did not come home for 3 days. A man who, when I finally got pregnant with Chisom and carried her safely, cried tears of joy and then turned to me and said his mother wanted the baby to be raised partly in the village. His mother, always his mother. Her name was Lolo Ngozi Okonkwo, a woman built like a fortress and cold like one too. She had hated me from the day Emeka brought me home because I was from Aba, because my mother was a seamstress, because I did not come with land or connections or a big church family behind me. She used to look at me and smile and say, "You are welcome, my daughter," and somehow make it sound like a threat. When Emeka got sick, kidney failure, slow and cruel, Lolo swooped in. She moved into our house. She pushed me out of my own bedroom. She fed him her own soups and told him my cooking was making him worse. She filled his ears with poison in the night when I was sleeping. And somewhere in those final months, she turned him against me just enough that he died without changing his will, without protecting me, without protecting Chisom. And now she had my daughter. I stopped walking for a moment on that dark road and I let myself feel it fully, the grief, the rage, the absolute crushing weight of it. And then I breathed it out into the night air and I kept moving. Because Chisom needed me, and a mother's need to reach her child is stronger than any pain. I want you to stay with me on this journey. If this story is touching something inside you, if you have ever fought for someone you love or been betrayed by people who should have protected you, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications. There is so much more story ahead, and it only gets heavier before it gets lighter. By midnight, I had reached a small junction town, and a woman selling akara by the roadside took one look at my face and offered me water and a seat. I did not even know I was shaking until I sat down. "Where are you going, my sister?" she asked me. "Arochukwu," I said. She looked at me for a long time. "Tonight?" "My daughter," I said. That was all. Just those 2 words. She nodded slowly, the way women nod when they understand something that does not need more explanation. She gave me 2 akara and refused my money. She flagged down a passing truck and spoke to the driver in Igbo, and the driver agreed to take me as far as the Arochukwu junction. Even in the darkest roads, God places people. I arrived in Arochukwu at dawn, when the air still smelled of firewood and wet grass, and the keke napeps were just beginning to move through the streets. I knew this place. I had come here many times as Emeka's wife, for Christmas, for New Yam, for the endless cycle of family ceremonies that his people used to remind you of your place. I had always come as a guest, polite, careful, dressed well, bringing gifts, trying to belong. Today, I came as something else entirely. I went straight to the compound of Emeka's family, the large walled compound with the green gate that his father had built when he was alive. I could hear voices inside, morning sounds, pots, a child crying. That cry stopped my heart. Was that Chisom? I banged on the gate so hard the metal rang out like a bell across the whole street. A young house girl opened it, saw my face and stepped back. I walked past her like she was air. Lolo Ngozi was sitting in the veranda, drinking tea, wearing a bright yellow blouse like she had not a single trouble in the world. When she saw me, she did not flinch. She actually smiled. "Adaeze," she said, "I was wondering how long it would take you. Where is my daughter? Lower your voice in my compound. Where is my daughter?" I was not lowering anything. The neighbors were already appearing at their windows. Good, let them watch. Let all of Arochukwu watch. She set down her tea slowly. "Chisom is resting. She is fine. She is with her family. I am her family. I am her mother. You are a widow with no home, no money, and no people. What kind of life can you give her? We can give her education, connection, a good name. You, what do you have? Your mother's sewing machine?" There it was, the poison she had been storing for 9 years, finally free. Around me, I could feel the compound filling up. Emeka's brothers, their wives, some cousins, all of them forming a wall behind Lolo, a wall of family, of bloodline, of belonging, and me on the other side, alone. But then, something happened that none of us expected. A door opened at the far end of the veranda, and Chisom walked out. She was in a dress I had never seen before. Her hair was freshly caited, but her eyes, when they found me, those eyes broke open like a dam. "Mama!" She ran to me so fast she nearly fell. I caught her and held her so tight I felt her ribs. She was shaking. She was crying into my neck, her small hands gripping my back like she was afraid I would disappear. "Mama, I told them to call you. I told them. I kept telling them. I don't want to stay here, Mama. I want to go home." I held her face in my hands and looked at her. She was not hot, not physically, but her eyes had a fear in them that had not been there before. A new knowledge, the knowledge that adults can be cruel and that the world is not always safe. She was 9 years old and they had already taught her that. I stood up. I held her hand. I turned to Lolo and I said something I had been afraid to say for 9 years. "You spent our entire marriage trying to unmake me. You took my husband's love and you twisted it. You took his final days and you poisoned them. And now you thought you could take my child. But I am still standing and I am taking my daughter home." I turned to walk. "You won't make it past the gate," Lolo said behind me. "I have already spoken to the police. We have documents, a lawyer. You have nothing." I kept walking, but my heart was hammering because she was right about one thing. I had nothing. No lawyer, no documents, no money, no powerful family. What was I going to do? They stopped me at the gate. 2 of Emeka's brothers, Chukwuemeka and Obiora, stepped in front of me like a wall. Big men, fed men, the kind of men who had never been hungry a day in their lives, and it showed in how they stood. Like the world owed them space. "You are not taking that child anywhere," Obiora said. Chisom pressed herself into my side. I felt her trembling. "Touch me," I said quietly, "and every woman in this street will know what you did today." He laughed, actually laughed, and that laugh, that sound of a man who believed completely that he could not be touched, it did something to the women standing nearby. Because there were women watching. There are always women watching. The house girl who had opened the gate, 2 women from the compound next door who had come out with their money wrappers still loose, an old woman sitting on a low stool further down the street, peeling something, watching everything with old eyes that had seen this kind of thing before. It was the old woman who moved first. She stood up from her stool slowly, like her bones had to make a decision one by one. She walked to the gate and she looked at Obiora and she said in Igbo, Obiora Okunkwo, I knew your father and your father would be ashamed of you today. The silence that followed that sentence was enormous. Then, the woman from next door, the one with the yellow bucket she had been using to fetch water, set the bucket down and walked over. Then her co-wife, then the house girl, stepped out from behind the gate and came to stand near me, not saying anything, just standing. Women joining women, the way they do when something old and wrong is happening and enough is enough. Obiora looked around at the gathering and something shifted in his face. Not guilt, men like him don't feel guilt quickly, but calculation. The calculation of a man who suddenly realized that this story could become a story people told, that his mother's name could become a name people said with a certain tone at the market. I did not wait for him to finish calculating. I walked through the gate with Chisom's hand in mine. Nobody stopped me. We walked 3 streets before I allowed myself to breathe properly. Chisom was quiet beside me, still holding my hand with both of hers. After a while, she said, Mama, where are we going? Good question. I had gotten this far on pure adrenaline and love. But Lolo had mentioned a lawyer, documents. I had no idea what legal tricks they had prepared. I needed help, real help, the kind of help that required money I did not have or connections I did not carry. And then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me. Adeaze, a woman's voice, low, careful. This is Ifelma, Emeka's cousin, the one from Port Harcourt. I heard what happened. I have been following it. I want to help you. I stopped walking. Why? I asked, because I had learned to ask why before I said yes to anything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because the same family did the same thing to my mother when my father died, and nobody helped her. I was 11 years old and I watched my mother beg at that gate. I have been waiting for a chance to make it right, not for me, for her, for all of us. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Then I said, tell me what you need me to do.
Ifelma was a lawyer, a real one, with offices in Port Harcourt and a voice that could cut through wood. She arrived in Arochukwu the next morning in a white Camry that drew attention the moment it turned into the street. She was tall, sharp-faced, dressed in a grey suit that said she had not come to argue, she had come to end things. We sat in a small guest house where she had rented a room, and she spread papers across the bed and began to explain. Mecca had a will, she said. I stared at her. He did not. His family said... His family lied, she said simply. There are 2 wills. The one they forced him to sign when he was sick and barely conscious, which, I can tell you, will not hold up in any court. And the first will, the original one, signed 3 years ago when he was healthy, witnessed by 2 people, registered with a solicitor in Aba. She slid a document across to me. I picked it up with shaking hands. Emeka's signature, his handwriting, that careful, slightly slanted handwriting I had watched sign our marriage certificate, sign Chisom's birth notification, sign the school enrollment form when we took her to primary 1. I read the document. I read it twice. My throat tightened. He had left the house to Chisom. He had named me as sole guardian. He had written a paragraph, a full paragraph that said in plain language that his daughter was to remain with her mother under all circumstances and that his family had no claim over the child's person or upbringing. He knew, I whispered. He knew. They would try. He knew, Ifeoma confirmed. He called me 6 months before he died. He was afraid. He said his mother was pressuring him. He asked me to keep the document safe. He made me promise not to give it to anyone except you, and only if something happened to him and the family moved against you.
I thought about all the nights I had lain next to Mecca in that bed, in those final months, staring at the ceiling and feeling alone, feeling like he had chosen his family over me, feeling like I was invisible. He had been fighting for me in secret, in the only way he could, weak and sick and surrounded by his mother's people. He had been fighting for Chisom. He just had not been able to tell me. I do not know if that makes things better or worse. Perhaps both. Perhaps that is what complicated love looks like. It does not save you in the moment you need saving, but it leaves traces behind, small evidences that you were seen. Ifeoma filed the papers that same day. She also filed a complaint with the police commissioner, not the local officers who Lolo had already spoken to, but higher, with documentation, with names, with the full charge of child abduction. The next morning, two things happened simultaneously. The pastor of the church where Lolo was a prominent member, the same pastor who had come to my gate and told me I deserved what was happening to me, received a letter detailing his church members' actions. Ifeoma had sent it. Copied to the diocese, copied to 3 community leaders. And a journalist friend of Ifeoma's posted a short thread on social media. No names, but enough detail that anyone in Arochukwu who knew the family knew exactly who it was about. By afternoon, Lolo's phone was ringing with calls she did not want to receive. The pastor came to the compound, not to support her this time, to ask questions, to distance himself, because a church that stands behind child abduction is a church that loses its congregation. Obiora called Ifeoma and asked for a meeting. Ifeoma told him the only meeting available was in court, and Lolo Ngozi Okonkwo was for the first time in her life standing in the middle of a fire she did not set and could not control. It was 3 weeks later. The legal process had moved. Not fast. Nothing legal moves fast in this country, but it had moved. The original will had been verified. Chisom had been officially, legally documented as being in my custody. Ifeoma had been extraordinary. The community pressure had been extraordinary. Even some of Emeka's family, the quieter ones, the ones who had always watched Lolo with careful eyes, had come forward to confirm what they knew. Chisom and I were staying in a small rented room in Aba, near my mother's house. It was not much. 1 room, a small kitchen, a shared bathroom. Chisom slept on the inner side of the bed and held my hand through the night for the first 2 weeks. Slowly, she began to let go during the night. Slowly, she began to laugh again. The first time she laughed, really laughed, that full, embarrassing laugh, I excused myself to the kitchen and stood there and cried for 5 full minutes. The kind of crying you do when something you thought was lost comes back. Then one morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and found Lolo Ngozi Okonkwo standing there. Without her yellow blouse, without her compound, without her sons behind her, without the fortress she had spent decades building around herself. She was just an old woman in a plain black dress, her wrapper tied simply, her face carrying all of her 70-something years like weight. I did not invite her in. I stood in the doorway. She did not ask to come in. She stood where she was and she looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time, and she said, "I came to tell you something. I have not come to beg. I do not know how to beg, but I have come to say it." I waited. "I treated you badly," she said. "From the beginning, I treated you like you were less than. I told myself it was because of the family name, because of standards. But the truth is," she paused and something moved in her face, something she was clearly not accustomed to showing. "The truth is that when Emeka chose you, he stopped choosing me, and I never forgave you for that. I took it out on you for 9 years, and then I took your child." The street was quiet. a goat walked past. Somewhere, a radio was playing. Ordinary morning sounds around this extraordinary, terrible confession. I cannot give you back those years, she continued. I cannot give you back the things I said. I cannot give you back the way I made you feel in your own house. But I can tell you that the child, Chisom, she has her father's eyes, and she has your fighting spirit, and she deserves a mother who fights for her the way you do. She reached into her bag and brought out an envelope. She set it on the doorstep between us. That is the title document for the plot of land in Emeka's name that was not part of the legal proceedings. It belongs to Chisom. It is her inheritance, not the family's, hers. Then she turned and walked back down the street. I stood there for a long time, not knowing exactly what I felt. It was not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not something that arrives in one morning. It is a road, longer and harder than the one I had walked on that dark Tuesday night. But it was something, a crack in something that had been sealed shut. I picked up the envelope. I went inside. Chisom was at the small table doing her homework. She looked up at me with those eyes, her father's nose, my stubbornness. Who was at the door, Mama? I sat down across from her. I held the envelope. I looked at my daughter, alive, safe, laughing again, holding her pencil the wrong way like she always does, her hair rough because she had fought me about replaiting it this morning, and I felt something so large I could barely name it. Nobody important, I said. Focus on your homework. She rolled her eyes the way 9-year-olds do and went back to her book. And I sat there in that small room, in that ordinary morning, and understood something I will carry for the rest of my life. I walked 100 miles to find my daughter, but what I found at the end of that road was not just her. I found myself, the woman I had always been but had spent years apologizing for. The woman who walks through dark roads and knocks on gates and does not lower her voice when her child needs her. The woman who survives, not because life was kind to her, but because she refused to let its cruelty have the final word. I found Adaeze fully, finally. And that was worth every single step. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel, share this story, and drop in the comments the one word that describes how you feel right now. See you in the next story.